I'm Richard. This is my TZR250 2MA race bike, but it's not together and we need to get ready for the track day season and to try and do some racing this year. It's mid-March, I'm a bit delayed, but let's get this done, get it back on track. Let's get this together.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take the tank off and the seat unit, get a bit more access. Let's get this engine back into the frame and then we can start bolting exhaust and carbs and airboxes back on, and I'll talk you through it as we go, and then once we're back together I'll give you a rundown of the bike and tell you all about it. But for now, let's get the tank and the seat unit off and start getting the engine back in the frame. Now, quite lucky, obviously it's been a two-stroke engine, doesn't weigh too much. I'm sure plenty of you have lifted in two-stroke engines back into the frame, so not quite as bad as a four-stroke engine, multi-cylinder lifting into a frame. But what I plan to do is just lift it from this side and come in to the frame, which luckily the cradle, I don't know if you can see this, comes down a little bit away from the actual frame. It gives a bit more room and basically just bolts in here into the cradle here, and another bolt going up through here for an engine stay. And then once we're in there, we can start bolting everything back together onto it. So yeah, here we go, let's lift this in. Right, let's see how easy we can do this. Let's just move it across a little bit. Give myself a bit more room. Okay, so just gently resting there in a minute. Now, what I'm going to do is put the first front engine bolt in, and then we can pull the cradle up, lift it back towards the frame, and that will put the rear engine mount back in its place, and then hopefully we'll be all good. If not, you can laugh as it falls out the frame. Okay, so that's the engine loosely just put into the cradle for now. I've just put the front engine bolt through, just here. Obviously we've still got the rear one to line up and put the bolt through. And obviously the cradle at the top here goes and bolts up to the frame up here. So my plan is just to bring this frame, this cradle, back to the frame up here, bolt it loosely, which would make it easier to pull this back and put the mounting bolt through. So got some nice titanium bolts to hold it all together. Nice titanium bolt through here. Obviously you can see there's a bit of a pattern going on. These are all titanium bolts here, titanium. Got a bit crazy with it. So yeah, let's get this cradle back bolted up, and then we can get this one done, and then we can do the mount underneath here. The damper has a bolt going through underneath here as well. So let's get that done and I'll bring you back in. Right, okay, so now we've got the mounting bolts through at the front here with the nut on it, the one at the back there, one's up on the engine cradle up here, and then obviously another important one that sometimes can get forgot about is this one here. So obviously it's not done up yet, but so let's start talking these up. Manual, it says these are 55 Newton meters on that rear engine mount, front engine mount, and the one for the damper underneath here, and the ones at the top here are 25 Newton meters, these two. So let's get these done up, and then we can start moving on to bolting everything else onto it. Start getting it back together. Okay, so now they're all torqued up, just a quick little word in terms of if you're fitting titanium bolts, just a little bit of copper slip on them in terms of when you do them up just stops them sometimes from wanting to bind up. If you're fitting titanium nuts and bolts, they often actually say on the packet a little bit of copper slip grease, but yeah, just in case they don't, if you're fitting spindles, replacing bolts, nuts, etc., a little bit of copper slip on them does help. But next job, let's just fit this power valve pulley back on. So we've got 2 bolts to actually hold the back part of the casing on, and then the actual pulley itself, if I can do this with one hand, pull it back through, it's bolted through the centre here, and obviously we will check that obviously it all lines up perfectly, and obviously any adjustment we need to do will be done. But let's get this fitted back onto here, and that'll be another job off the list. Right, okay, so that's that pulley put back on. That's obviously for the power valve system. So this is your lining up mark in here with obviously adjusters with these 2 lock nuts, the actual adjuster underneath the rubber cover. And obviously what you want to do, if we can get a view up the exhaust port, if it's possible, I'm not sure if how much we're gonna see, you can always obviously just make sure that the power valve itself, by actually sticking your finger up in the barrel, or just make sure it's lined up so it's flush, and obviously you can use the adjusters to make sure you've got the right amount of slack, and you can always put something like that in there to hold it in the middle while you do the adjusters so it doesn't move. Make sure it's always lined up. Worth a check. You don't want that going out of alignment and making a big mess in the engine. So that's that ticked off the list. I think what we'll do next, we'll get these electrics put back in the right place. Some of you might have noticed this, obviously we were running an F3 ignition, well, part of the ignition on the crank, but I'll run you through all of that once we've built, give you a walk around the bike, explain everything that's been done to it. There's quite a bit, but yeah, so let's crack on. Let's start getting the electrics on. So we're left with putting the carbs on, airbox, obviously radiator and exhaust. So there's not too much to do. Obviously being a 2-stroke, it's nice and easy, and obviously being a race bike, obviously there's no road parts as such, so there's a lot less in the way of obviously rebuilding this little race 2-stroke, which is nice. Get rid of all the road stuff, everything you don't need. So yeah, let's crack on then and get some more bits bolted back together, and I'll bring you back in on the next stage. Right, okay, so got a couple of bits clipped up, a couple of other nuts and bolts put on, but first disaster, well, it's not exactly a disaster. This is the temperature gauge sensor, which sits up in here in this brass fitting. Sits in here like this, and then this would go inside, so it measures the water temperature. Obviously sometimes I just put coolant in it just for storing the bike, but obviously when we're on track days and racing, obviously it's just distilled water that goes in it. But obviously this is an aftermarket system rather than the genuine Yamaha, fitment and stuff. But as you can see, I was just doing it up just gently. Obviously it is an old part, but it's broke. So luckily, obviously, it just managed to come out okay. So, but we're going to have to replace that. So for the minute, obviously we're not going to be able to complete the bike, so I have to order that up and get a new one fitted. Not the end of the world, but you know, obviously some problems you can come across with a older race bike, especially being a two-stroke. Sometimes obviously they just need a little bit more maintenance than some other race bikes. Yeah, so we get a new one of them ordered up. But let's carry on. Let's get the exhaust fitted, and then we can get the radiator back onto it. Beauty with the two-stroke race exhaust is literally, obviously we just got to slot it up into the collar, and then a couple of springs, and then literally it's mounted to the footrest hanger with, you guessed it, another titanium bolt. Got to replace this washer though, because that's not titanium and that just won't do. Right, so let's get this fitted up, and we'll get the other side on as well, and then we can go for the radiator, and then we'll start with the carbs and the airbox to fill up this gap. Yeah, get in there. Here we go. Right, okay, so let's get this exhaust on then. Obviously, as I said, it's nice and easy. Probably look a lot harder now that I've said that, but let's just offer this up. So we're literally just going to slot it into the collar. Obviously it lines up with the footrest hanger, so we're just going to pop the bolt through it for now. Then we can take spring puller, and then literally we just put the springs on. Hopefully I'm not in the way too much of the shop. There we go. So that's the front on. We've just got to put the nut on the back. There we go, one side done. Let's get on and do the other side. I'll do that off camera, then we'll bring you back in with, let's do the radiator next. Okay, so radiator time now then. So yeah, what we've got here is a aftermarket radiator for it. Meant to be ever so slightly larger than the standard Yamaha one. I don't think it's by much. Obviously the original Yamaha stuff obviously is all getting a bit worn out now, and obviously getting harder to find really nice second-hand ones. Obviously been a race bike, obviously need to cool it down a bit more, so experimented with this, but through the season probably will experiment with different radiators, see if we can get a larger one on it again to try and keep it running at a good temperature. But obviously the beauty with these little radiators is that it's literally just got to bolt on to here, and the same on the other side, and then slots up into this bracket up here. So again, it's just nice and easy fitment, and obviously when you're trackside, obviously needing to do any repairs or maintenance, it just makes it easier to come off, get to everything. So I think I'll take you around the other side and we'll bolt this up and obviously get the hose clamps done up. Obviously we've got some aftermarket hoses fitted to it, obviously with a HRC style bottle. You can see obviously got a little bit of coolant in it while it's stored, and I'm not using it, but I might need to run it up every now and again. Obviously I just do store it with coolant in it rather than water over the winter. If you've got a race bike, you'll know why. Okay, so let's get this around the other side and we'll start getting it bolted up.
Right, okay, let's get this radiator on. So, slot it into place. Let's roughly get this lined up. Get it lined up with the bracket at the top first, and we'll slot that into place. Then what I'll do is I'll put loosely the mounting brackets in. So we just loosely put these in for now. Won't do them up. We'll just put them into place. And then if I bring it round, bring it round on top of the engine, and then we can fit the top hose onto this housing. And if we reach in and bring down the clip, obviously easier when you're using two hands rather than just the one, trying to hold the camera. But we'll bring that down into place and do that up. And then the same on this side, I've put it onto the housing, but we'll just bring that down, do that up. And then what we'll do is we'll do up the two bolts, one either side. So that's clipped in at the top, just sits in there like that, nice and neat, with obviously the wiring running through. We just make sure none of that's trapped. Might need to change that. There's a little bit of room there, but I think we'll run it through actually underneath the bracket instead. So let's get on and get that done. Okay, so radiator's fit up nicely. We've done up on the bolts. Just moved that wiring because it just didn't quite like where it was sat behind the bracket, and I'll explain about the wiring loom and the electrics once we've got it built, because it's all changed. It's not standard Yamaha stuff. Obviously as a race bike you just keep developing as much as you can. But let's get the carbs on next. So obviously we need to pull these out, just that's there to stop anything from going into the inlet. But we've got our choke plungers here, got the end of the carb slides, we've got our carbs. These have been stripped and cleaned after every time it's been used for a track day or racing, or whether I just have done some modifications or just run it up. Before the next time I use it, I do always just strip these down, give a quick clean through for the pilot jets, and make sure there's obviously nothing blocked in them or gummed up. Obviously we're running a quick release connection at the top there for the tank. So let's get these bolted back on. So yeah, we pull these out, get the slides back on, then we get the choke plungers in, get these bolted on, and we can get the airbox on it, and then go from there. But we're getting there. Right, so carbs are back on now then. So yeah, it's just a case of obviously fitting the slides with the two bolts at the top, and then obviously the choke cables fitting on the 14mm fitting, and then obviously the clamps told them onto the inlet rubbers. Also we've got our fuel connection here, and obviously once you've fitted, obviously it's always worth just making sure obviously there's nothing caught and everything's operating freely. Obviously your slides are operating freely, and obviously when you go to fit it, I'm sure
a lot of you will know, but obviously just make sure you get your slides around the right way, because I'm sure there'll be people out there that are try and put them in backwards and wonder why everything doesn't fit. You don't want to break anything as you do it. So now time to put the airbox on. Now with this one, I'm literally just going to try and fit it here, because it literally just does normally push on quite nice and easy. Sometimes you need two hands to do it, but we just push on to the back. Obviously now I'm trying to film it and do it one-handed, it probably won't want to do it. Just double check we're all the way around on both. Yep, and it obviously just pushes down at the back. Now you'll notice that even though it's clamped at the back on these ones, I don't clamp these going onto the carb, basically because this comes off so often, because we're cleaning and checking the carbs, checking jetting, obviously checking we're all good at the track, that just keep unbolting these, bolting back up, it just almost taking up time. And this airbox basically can't go anywhere, it's held in at the back, so it can't go backwards because of this rear mount on the frame. Obviously the tank's on top of it, it literally can't go anywhere, and we don't get any air leaks. I mean, this is a tight seal anyway. Some people do actually put cable ties around these, I've seen, just to give them a bit more, but they don't go anywhere, they don't leak, as long as obviously you've got them fitted right and they're sealed all the way around. I don't see a problem. So that's all on there. Again, you'll notice that the airbox is different to a standard Yamaha one. Obviously we're cut away at the sides, cut away at the back. These normally do have a snorkel that go in there. Most people just remove them and obviously just rejet, but I've been playing around with different tuning settings and different carb settings. We're running sort of an F3 type setup in the carbs. It did require more air, so we've been playing around with this airbox. We've got another airbox to try as well, so we're just going to keep trying on a dyno different settings until we get obviously the most power and the most sort of performance and torque from it. So this is one type of setup we've tried. We're sticking with this for the minute. Again, it's got a hole in the front. You'll see why it's got a hole in the front there in a little while. A bit more of a modification to it. So yeah, we're getting there. Let's see what else we can get fitted back to it and see what else we can get done. Okay, so yeah, I think I've gone as far as I can go today. I've just loosely put the tank and the seat unit back on, just to keep them out of the way, stop them from getting damaged, just keep them back on the bike. So yeah, what to do next then? Yeah, obviously we need to get the temperature sensor housing bit ordered up, get that fitted, get some coolant in it, we'll get some fuel in it, just nut and bolt everything else, get the fairings back on, and then we can get it run up. I'm going to replace the chain. I've fitted the chain onto it, but it's done a season, that one, so we'll just replace that before we actually start using it. They're not dear, so we generally just replace them every year anyway. Just put a new one on it. It's not worth just running them for too long, seeing as they're not dear to buy, so we just replace them every season. But yeah, and I'll explain this tube and a few more details about the bike. But we're getting there. The beauty of obviously a little two-stroke race bike is they just don't take long to put together. Obviously don't take long to pull apart either, which is good, because obviously they can be a bit troublesome sometimes. But that's the fun of owning a little two-stroke race bike. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.